News, play breakdowns, power rankings, storylines you never hear talked about anywhere else. It's all straight shots here, fired by straight shooters. S and Gun. This is the Objective Basketball Podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Objective Basketball Podcast. No Lauren this week. She'll be back. She'll be back on Thursday when we talk about, the NBA a little bit more generally. But as I mentioned on Twitter, we do have a guest, and he is jumping on to talk about the great Minnesota Timberwolves, the number one seed in the Western Conference. Minnesota Timberwolves. We're joined by Dane Moore, who covers the Minnesota Timberwolves, host of the Dane Moore NBA Podcast. Dane, how you doing, man?
I'm good. You get asked on more national podcasts when the team is good.
When the Timberwolves are doing well.
Yeah. Not a lot the early Anthony Edwards years. So we were often forgotten territory, ignore until otherwise they become relevant. And yeah, man, they're relevant. This is like legit a good team. I don't think there's been much debate internally over here locally in Minnesota and nationally. It feels right. Like this team's getting respect as one of the better teams in the league, or at least in the Western Conference.
I think that expectation was sort of there last season. At least, from coming in, you had this expectation. Okay, they made the Rudy Gobert trade. Now this team is ready to kind of get off into the next stage of whatever it's going to be. And injuries derailed that, right? Cat went down for a large portion of the season. Then later when he came back, you had Naz Reid and Jaden McDaniels and all that. Injuries just piled up and you were never able to get this momentum going. Now it seems like that momentum is there. And I guess the calling card for this team so far this season has been their defense. They were number one for the first 2 or 3 weeks, and now they've kind of fallen to third. Obviously, I mentioned the best record in the West part, but I guess for people who may not be watching Timberwolves games still, and to be fair, like if you aren't, you should be, because they are a lot of fun to watch now. What do you think the Wolves are doing on that end to be this elite defense and sort of, I guess, making that their calling card?
Yeah, I think there's a technical answer to that, and there's a personality answer to that. And you mentioned momentum and picking up momentum. They're gaining momentum in games, particularly against really good teams, having beaten the Nuggets, the Celtics, the Warriors twice.
Yep.
That the momentum is a product of the defense, and the defense is a product of Rudy Gobert. And personality-wise and understanding his teammates and that comfort was not there last season. And particularly as it connects to Gobert, Gobert came into last season a little bit banged up from Eurobasket and all that, but it was weird kind of even as the season went on, how he just kind of physically did not look like Utah Rudy, which led some people to start being like, okay, he's in his 30s now. And, some people start like drawing DeAndre Jordan comparisons where you're like, it really fell off after 30. And I was always just skeptical of the idea that physically he had really started to take any major steps back. And it looked so much to me like comfort and like his blocks are down, right? So people go, oh, he's not jumping as high anymore. I'm like, I don't know. Like when you're playing in a drop, you kind of have to have confidence in the players behind you or around you or at the point of attack to know when to go and kind of sell out for that block. And I just think his comfort and confidence with his teammates is really on a different level this season than it was a year ago. And yeah, we can talk about some scheme stuff, but I think that comfort and confidence from Rudy in particular it's what keeps things normal, and then everything else is tweaks, right? It's the big thing again, specific to Rudy, is they're not afraid to let him kind of roam a little bit more, whether that be more aggressive in coverages, playing out on switches out onto the perimeter. But I think they've really unlocked what's going to be their weapon, which is putting Cat on the 5 and having Rudy roam off of non-shooters.
Right.
Like that's when people say they match up well with Denver, it's not necessarily that they match up with Denver, but that's a pretty ideal alignment for this Wolves team where it's a really good, Aaron Gordon's a really good player, but Rudy can kind of just play off of him and lurk/double Jokic when Cat's on ball there. And that's the weapon, man. That's the weapon of this team. And really the only way to hurt that is to have your non-shooter who Rudy's lurking off of start hitting shots. They got smacked pretty good by Phoenix on Wednesday. And it's because Josh Okogie goes 3 for 3 from 3 and Drew Eubanks goes 4 for 4 or goes 1 for 1. So those two guys who are non-shooters, go 4 for 4. So it kind of breaks the like Rudy being able to lurk thing.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, right? Like that's a weapon. That's a real weapon when it's Rudy Gobert who's lurking off, which credit to Cat too for being able to handle, the primary 5 Jokic in those situations. That's once it comes around playoff time, that's what we're gonna be talking about. We're gonna be like, oh, this is this team's defensive weapon is Rudy all over the place. When we've always thought of Rudy just in a drop, right? Defending the rim. So that's where the momentum comes from, and that's kind of the schematic shift that we're seeing.
I think there's a couple of parts that I kind of want to pull from there. I thought, when you mentioned Rudy, the other aspect of this, obviously the shot blocking is going to be a massive part of it, the rim protection, the versatility, but I think closing out possessions is also a huge part of it, right? Yeah. Defensive rebounding. This team struggled in that department last year. Even before getting Rudy, that was a huge issue. It's like, hey, how are we going to close out these possessions, right? It's been a disaster. Mm-hmm. And I think last year they were like bottom 10 in defensive rebounding.
26th last year and 30th the year before that in defensive rebounding.
But it's improved, right?
Yeah.
So it's like middle of the pack, I think it is this year. It's like near the top of the league for, I think, defensive rebounding percentage. Like you're closing out possessions much more. And I think that size advantage that you mentioned with Cat and Gobert, it's playing a factor. But I wanted to ask you, do you think they have more of a rebound by committee approach this season, or is it just we're forcing Rudy to be that guy for us this year?
No, I think Rudy is doing a better job of like attacking the glass to clean up around the rim. Like he really I don't know. Next time we watch a Wolves game, like Rudy like flies in to get rebounds because again he's not just in a drop sitting by the rim turning around boxing out. Like he's flying in there. He's doing a better job defensive rebound in that way. I think Cat kind of like coming back from the perimeter, if he's guarding a stretch 4, is doing a good job of ending possessions. Nas doing some of that too. But if you ask Chris Finch, which again, over 2 years, but defensive rebounding has been a disaster. Yeah. We've asked him about it a lot of times. And he always says it's on the guards. It's the long rebounds, right? It's the ones that when it lands like 15 feet from the basket, which is over Rudy's head, over Karl's head.
Yeah.
It is Jaden McDaniels going to come back in there to get that. Mike Conley, Ant. And Ant really no reason Ant shouldn't be a good rebounder. He just started realizing like, that's my spot, to go get those. And it's just, I don't know. I think the guards are just more technically on point and caring about defensive rebounding than they were a year ago. Mm-hmm. It was really different guards last season. With D'Angelo Russell instead of Mike Conley, you had Bryn Forbes and Austin Rivers in the mix, right? Who are just smaller players than, that's being replaced by Shake Milton or something who has a 7'1" wingspan, or Jaden's now playing all his minutes on the wing.
Nikhil,
they're bigger. Nikhil, man, of course. Yeah. We got to talk about Nikhil. Like,
of course, yeah.
He has that give a shit factor, Mm-hmm. and the guards have that way more this season. So yeah, like Rudy's springier, he's attacking the glass, but I think the defensive rebounding delta is a product of the guards and wings.
So you mentioned, this is something that's really fascinating to me because like you look at, some people will look at the Milwaukee Bucks and say, okay, why are they struggling so much on defense? They have Giannis Antetokounmpo and Brook Lopez. They're playing this conventional drop at times. Yes, they're changing schemes and being a little bit different than usual under Adrian Griffin, but a lot of people are like, hey, what's going on? But it's the tandem between the guards and the bigs that is really important in drop, right? Going over, chasing over these screens. The Houston Rockets, they've been very successful this year on defense because, hey, Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks are going after and fighting through all of these screens. And I think you're seeing that this year with the Timberwolves as well. You see Ant fighting through, Conley, obviously, fighting through, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jaden McDaniels, like you mentioned. That tandem between guard, perimeter defense, if you will, and the deep drop or whatever scheme that any team really wants to play is super important for a defense.
It's just not relying exclusively on your bigs 10 possessions, right? Yeah. Like that's the overly simplified answer. And I think this team saw 7'2" Rudy Gobert walk in the door last season. They're like, all right, rim protection and defensive rebounding taken care of. And it's like, oh, wait, like the low man has to defend the rim sometimes. The weak side guard has to come in to crash. Like it's, I think it's a very good literal example of a year, right? And having more time together to actually be able to understand each other and understand what you're not good at as a group. Like, I think that's a big reason why this team is just better in general this season.
Just to sample, like just to know what you can and can't go through, right?
What was the sample of that last year? Like, when was it good last year?
Yeah, exactly. No, you're right.
And
what did you get to see last year?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It just wasn't. It was like the best months were when the team looked nothing like it is ever going to look at, when they were like, all right, like D'Lo's hurt, Ant's the point guard, and we're only playing with one big.
Yeah.
Which was completely different than the identity they went into the season finding. They chose an identity this year, and they're executing on that identity, which was supposed to be the identity of a season before. So I think that's a credit to Finch too, for like not giving up.
Yeah.
And a credit to Tim Connolly for believing in continuity.
Man, you know, it's funny because Tim Connolly comes from Denver, and everybody praised Denver for the continuity, right? It's like, stick with your guns, stick with what you had. And they did that for, multiple seasons and turned into a championship. I think it is underrated, especially when you have the talent, when you have Anthony Edwards, Cat, all those guys, the core, the foundation of what can be. And maybe, later on we'll get into the financial implications of keeping that core together. But ultimately, like, hey,
that's a less fun conversation.
That is a less fun,
but it's a real one.
I know. Okay, look, the defense has been incredible, but the offense has been like middle of the pack ish so far. I think there are some real ways that it can get better. Ultimately, just guys shooting more, Jaden McDaniels getting into rhythm a little bit more too. What have you seen that maybe feels like, okay, this can tangibly get better versus, okay, this is a flaw. Like, this is not something that's going to work. Is it still the wonky space thing with Cat and Gobert, or is it something else that's maybe not getting this team to click offensively?
It's the spacing.
Yeah.
And they were like super intentional about that in training camp and
Finch
into
mentioned it, right?
Yeah, a bunch. But like the spacing, even though they talked about it all through training camp or whatever, it wasn't good the first few games. And it's like, that we all kind of know the typical Cat play now is like the high quad pump and go to the basket.
Yeah.
Well, Rudy's going to be in the right or left dunker spot. And if he's in the right dunker spot and Cat pumps and goes right, like that gets wonky pretty quick. He's driving his man who's on him. It's an isolation. He's not just blowing by the guy. Right. He's needing to navigate that. He was getting all the offensive fouls because he's trying to clear out his guy before he gets to Rudy's guy coming over to help. And there was just like a handful of possessions early on. I mean, Karl started really poorly offensively. He's been awesome in the last 5 games. But what's also happened in the last 5 games is they started positioning Rudy a little bit different. They're like dragging that dunker spot thing out as far as possible. That isn't a corner 3. They're putting Rudy up in the slot a little bit more, like elbow extended right there. Just so Cat's a really good driver. He needs a ton of space to be able to do that because he's
career high drives right now, I believe, right? I think it's like 9
I'm not
points.
sure that's a great thing, but it's a big part of the game. Like some of those, my biggest thing I think Cat should have a step back game. I think he should have a jab and shoot game and all that. So the 3-point volume's up. Like he's really worked on the last few years of developing that pump and go or just taking you off the basket game. And it's been good,
right?
But it was its best the year before Rudy got here. Well, that's because you didn't have a center who was standing right underneath the basket. So Karl's learning and acclimating to this balance of like, I need to fire threes when Rudy's out there, but I'm also going to play like 18 minutes a night as the 5 or 15 maybe.
Right.
And in those minutes, like, Nas will be in the corner or it's going to be a spread 4 situation. So he's kind of figuring out how to be the old version of Cat when he's at the 5 and the new version of Cat when he's at the 4. And that's critical because when Cat doesn't have either of those going, then he's bad.
Right.
And you get bad Cat and you totally lose the ceiling to this team. Like on a micro scale from game to game or big picture, like people, particularly the first week, looking like a problem with Cat, whatever, it starts they need to trade him conversation, get picks and a bag of chips. And it's like, if it's a bag of chips, are the players you get this season if you trade him at the deadline. That removes your ceiling for this season. And yeah, maybe like big picture, you're like, well, I don't know, this and that. Well, like
tangibly,
this season, you're supposed to be good this season.
Yeah, they're a good team right now. It's hard to convince yourself to say, hey, we should trade a guy who's, by the way, been with the franchise for his entire career. And let's trade this guy who is on probably like, okay, the contract stuff, the financial implications again. But ultimately, when you're already really good and you've started off the season well, and hey, maybe there's a chance you can be frisky in the playoffs and get to the conference finals, or, the in-season tournament, hey, there's a chance the Timberwolves could win that thing, and that would be huge for this franchise too. You know what I mean? Like, hey, I know it's a great, I want to talk to you about the in-season tournament after too, but I mean, like, there's more at stake than just, hey, trade him because this is not working out right now. Okay.
We should tie that into the financial thing, because it's so like they're so back.
Are we going to talk? Let's talk about it now.
We should do it because it's like it totally cannibalizes your chances of going to the Western Conference Finals this year.
Yeah,
if you make a cost-cutting move or roster rearrangement move to let Cat go,
right?
Give away that it's not happening this year.
Well, also you're not going to get a lot right now,
exactly, because of how big his contract is. But he makes $36 million this year, and it jumps to $52 next year, and that's a $16 million gap right there. And they're already at the second apron line with that 52, and that's with Mike Conley and Kyle Anderson, unrestricted free agents. And this team, I promise you, does not work without those two guys.
Well, if you look at the numbers, it absolutely does not work without those two guys.
Watch it, whatever. Yeah. Know those two guys, like that's the real thing. Know Kyle Anderson and Mike Conley, like critical for Ant, for Carl, for Rudy, for Finch. Yeah. They love those two guys. They need them, and so it like kind of as this will naturally be a topic of conversation come the trade deadline is. People will look at the financial figures and talk about Cat. Like, there's an argument to be made there too. That is like, all right, you do trade Cat for whatever. It means you get to keep Mike Conley and Kyle Anderson next season. You can re-sign them maybe with that 16, 20 million of space that you would have below the second apron line. So it's a fair conversation. It's just that conversation can only be brought up while acknowledging that if you trade him at the deadline, you all but give up your shot on this being a year or the year. It's only going to get harder from a roster construction standpoint going forward, because Ant jumps up from 13 this year to 37, 44 if he makes All-NBA. Jaden goes up from like $4 million this year to 25 next year. By the way,
Ant is probably getting to an All-NBA.
And that's a big part of this finance. I mean, he's probably going to make All-NBA if he stays healthy, right? Like, so we probably should be thinking about Ant jumping from 13 to 44 rather than 13 to 37. So it's just going to be an extremely expensive team that in many ways is going to be very difficult to hold together, even if you have ownership's green light to pay the luxury tax.
So I was going to ask that.
The second apron? I don't know.
That's the part I was going to ask. It's okay. Ownership is changing, right? They haven't fully paid out whatever sum it is. That's still kind of in proxy, whatever is happening on that
December.
end.
Yeah.
Right. But ultimately, like, it's inevitably going to change over. Do you think they are more, the Walmart CEO guy is going to cough up that more money? You know what I mean? Like, is that possible? Do you think it'll be?
We got to talk about how much the money is, man. And this is the real second apron thing. Yeah. It's like, and I will just point out by saying this: Golden State and the Clippers made cost-cutting moves because of the second apron already. They already did that. And Steve Ballmer's as rich as it gets. That was letting go of Eric Gordon, right? And Steve Ballmer is as rich as it gets as personal wealth of an owner in the NBA. And then Joe Lacob and the Warriors, I don't know, I mean, his net worth is not the same as Ballmer's, but that's as profitable of a business as any team there. And those two teams have already made provisions in place to not exceed the
So what you're saying is it's inevitable, right? Like they're essentially.
No, I'm saying that I think a lot of teams are not going to pay the second apron tax just because of what the tax bill is. Not even because you lose your mid-level exception or your pick gets magically frozen into the future or what any of that. Like that's its own thing. That's a thing. I actually don't think that's super important in the context of the Wolves. Like I'm not sure they need a full mid-level exception next season. Yeah. But I mean, we're talking about like maybe $130 million in just a tax payment if you exceed the second apron, or more than that, depending how much you go over that. That's a check. That's a cash check. You can't leverage your other businesses or whatever to pay a 1 season second apron exceeding luxury tax payment. That's no joke. Like, plus you don't get the disbursement of the other teams that pay the luxury tax and get that money back too. So if they don't agree to go into the second apron or exceed the second apron, I don't think that can be considered like ridiculous bad ownership. I mean, I'm not saying that to like defend A-Rod or Laurie or anything. Like, what, we don't even know them yet all that well. Objective. We're on the objective podcast, right?
Yes, objectively, we are trying to be objective here. Yeah, absolutely.
Objectively, that's a huge payment to pay, and I don't think the Wolves or a lot of teams will pay this beyond the second apron. Yeah. It just doesn't. We'll see. I guess we'll see. This is new. This is all new, and the Wolves are in the nexus of it, you know. And it's the funny thing where we can't. It's the salary cap that can't exceed. Well, you can exceed all of these numbers. You can pay the luxury tax if you want to. It just comes out of your owner's pockets. So, and if they want to win over this fan base once they take over, you pay a fat luxury tax payment. You privately fund a new stadium. Like Minnesota will
praise them like the gods. Yes. No, absolutely. Yeah, it's tough, man. It's tough because they've been good. They've been objectively very good. And there is a chance that they can make some noise this year, whatever that noise may be. And you have to question, it's like, well, how much are we going to cough up in order to do that? And also, hey, you have this superstar face of the league potential type of guy in Anthony Edwards, and he might be good enough right now. He's probably going to get better. He's inevitably going to get better, but he might be good enough right now to win you a couple of playoff series. And how is that going to look? Maybe we're getting into doom and gloom way too much for a team that's at the top of the Western
No, it
Conference.
is an objective conversation. There's timelines here to this. And you're at the end of a timeline right now. And so things are going to change from cost and thus a roster construction standpoint. At some point, there's a decision tree to be made here, starting at the deadline. But if you're not trading Karl at the deadline, then in the summertime, and you have to ask yourself how ready Ant is to do that, you know. And obviously, we got 2 really good playoff series from him at age 20 and 21. He's 22 now. It kind of comes down to, do you believe he can be that dude now? He's going to be that at some point, right?
But it's about now. It's about the short term here.
The roster's about now.
Yeah.
And you can have, that's a whole nother existential conversation of it, whether it was the right idea to go all in and make an all in move for Rudy Gobert when Anthony Edwards was 21. Yeah.
Well, but they did.
What I'm saying, it is. It's done. It's done, and they're in now, and all the outside markers economically, whatever, suggests like this is a pretty good time to go, and the play has been good enough to go. So go now, and I don't know. This summer it gets funky. I just can't get over it's a totally different proposition from another team to trade for Karl-Anthony Towns when his matching salary is 36 versus 52. You get the supermax no matter what is tacked on there. But you got to have the matching salary of 36 versus 52. Like, you can maybe fill up 36 of expiring coming back if you do it 50? At the deadline.
That's tough.
But, I don't think you're getting, it will be the offseason at that point, so expirings will have expired. Yeah. And now you're taking back 52 just to match at that point. Like, it's a lot of players. We just went through that with Gobert. They had to trade 5 players to match Gobert's $40 million salary. It's going to be the same thing if you want to invert it and go the other way.
So if we're talking about Ant, and we kind of just mentioned him here, just in general, I think, you mentioned the injuries last season. I think there was like a tangible, if you will, I think the good thing about the injuries, even though there's never good things about the injuries, is that like it forced him to just try different things, experiment in a bunch of different ways, be the lead ball handler, like you mentioned, like just, hey, you're our point guard now for the next couple of months. Let's see how it works. And that forced him into different situations, forced him to, kind of grow. Growing pains happened last year for Anthony Edwards.
Navigating two on the ball, getting doubled
exactly
on a high pick and roll was the biggest thing he grew in there.
Absolutely.
Year.
How do you think that's looked this year?
I'm loving his, when he gets to the middle of the floor through coverage and finds skip passes to the corner. Like he had a great one in the second Golden State game. Mike Conley hits it there.
Right.
And that's, I mean, Ant had that coming out of Georgia. Like you saw that on his tape there where he could get to the nail and he could pass with his right hand or his left hand to the corners. Like he was a passer, or he was a scorer, but he had passing ability coming in. He's fine tuning that in the sense that he's now picking up of like, all right, do I have two guys on the ball? Are they up to touch? Is the low man rotating? Like he didn't get any of that
right
in the first 2 years of his career. He gets more of that now. He's not, it's still not like it's a long ways from Luka, right? Who's the best at that, but it's improving. And that ultimately is opening up him to be a real weapon in the middle of the floor. The push pull is, all right, he's in the middle of the floor. If he doesn't pass that, that's a ton of mid-range jump shots. And he's taken a ton of mid-range jump shots, and he's made a ton of
contested looks too, because there's like a lot of help at the nail being sent at him, and like if he's driving the ball, there's just
and he still shoots through. Right? Yeah, he shoots through it all the time, and again, he's shooting pretty well. He's like high 40s, I think, from the mid-range thus far this year. But in his first 3 years of his career, he shot better from 3-point range, like 37%, than he did from mid-range, so like 35, which is bad. Like he's not been an effective mid-range shooter in the aggregate in his career. So I think that's what they're kind of navigating right now. I mean, we asked Finch about it a lot, and he's like, I like it when they go in. And they are like, it's not like he should be removing some of those. Some of those are kill shots. I mean, he ended Boston, if you watch that game, with being able to get into the middle of the floor and take tough contested mid-range shots. Like he can kill with that, but what's the balance, right? Like how many is too many? Who are like, if I'm going to the middle of the floor and it's Mike Conley in the left corner and Jaden McDaniels in the right corner, those are pretty good corner shots. If it's Kyle Anderson and Shake Milton, like, all right, maybe this is a time to take the mid-range shot. But that's calculation on the fly, different defenses getting thrown at him. He's learning there. I don't know. Again, if Luka's an A+, Ant's like a B- maybe in that right now, which suggests more ceiling. That's kind of what I'm going to be tracking over the course of the year, though. Like, does that B- get up to an A- by the end of this year or 3 years from now? That's going to be a real telling thing.
There's moments I remember from the Celtics game where like real-time processing is a thing for him, because first, second quarter, okay, some of those reads, he's seeing them, but he's not making them. But then third, fourth quarter, okay, those same reads are there. He's making that read now. Overtime, I need to take over. I'm taking those shots. The attention is now on the other guys because Conley's involved, because, J-Mac is involved. He was hitting shots that game. Like there's something there to the real-time processing ability in game from quarter to quarter to figure out where those reads are coming from. I think that's an important part of becoming a lead ball handler in the game. Like people are talking about Cade Cunningham right now. It's like, how does he going to look and what he ends up being, whatever. That's a different conversation.
No, it's not a different conversation. It's okay. Cade is on a bad team in the third year of his career. And so they're kind of like trial by fire, learn the Luka way. Yeah. And the only time they really went into that was last year when Cat was down, because they became a bad team.
That bad. He did not look like there were moments. There were definitely moments where like he was shooting way over what he was. But like there was, I thought there was tangible growth there for last season.
It's just an interesting question for all these types of players,
right?
Who like have the skill set to become the heliocentric sort of Luka Harden type player. Yeah. That's a high bar. And you go, Ant, you have maybe the capability to do that. Cade, maybe you like have the skill set. Are we going to lean all the way into that though and make you an offense in and of themselves? The answer here in Minnesota has been no. except for that month in January where they were forced into it last year for the most part.
Right.
And I think that makes some sense with the roster construction. You do have Karl-Anthony Towns. That's also like Finch doesn't want to play like that. That's just like not his preferred style of basketball to play. So he's kind of like rebelled against that as
By the way,
much
to be
as
fair,
his,
like teams that don't play that style tend to do better in the playoffs. Like the
True.
Helio ball sometime, actually most of the times, other than when you're LeBron James, doesn't really work out. Like
no, the best version is when you can Jason Tatum it, right? And you can situationally go to it, and then you have other options and ways in which to get going to, which the Wolves have. Like the Wolves have a cat option there. They can run an empty corner pick and roll with Rudy and Mike. Like, you know, Jaden's a weapon. They got Naz Reid scoring off the bench. Like, they don't need Ant to have Luka's usage in that type of way. Though it is interesting. Ant's like, I looked it up last week. He was like 4th in the league in usage rate. So he's still kind of getting the ball as much as the guys who obsess about getting the ball to, like Luka. Though maybe finding it a little bit more organically, which I think that does that make sense? Like that, I think that's what Finch's goal is to get there.
It's in the process of the offense versus you are the offense, right? I'm a system player versus I'm a system. You know what I mean? Like, it's that whole conversation. And you mentioned the bench, which I think, you know, they have one of the best plus minuses among all benches this season so far. I think some of the fluidity.
That's kind of lies.
Do you think that's lies? Okay, I think there's like a level of fluidity with the lineups that you can throw out there that helps this team, right? You mentioned the Cat.
There's some good bench stuff. Like, Cat's sliding to the 5 and he's playing against backup 5s. Like that's great. I guess I'm more like thinking about the Royal bench and like there's bad times too. They're not getting much out of Shake Milton. Naz Reid was doing some stuff at the beginning of the year.
Yeah, now he's cooled off a little. Yeah.
It's just like, it feels like the bench rotation is about finding ways to empower the starting lineup to like extend out Cat going to the 5 at sometimes, or making sure Mike and Rudy are in and out together at all times.
Too, right? Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, does that make like it's more feel like they're focused on a bench identity.
Right. I feel like what you're saying is they might have 7 starters versus having an actual bench, in the sense that like, okay, Kyle Anderson is going to play some closing minutes, right? Kyle Anderson might close in some lineups. Same thing could apply to a guy like Naz Reid, who, depending on how the shot's falling and whatnot, could close in some games. You might have 7 starters versus 5 starters and 8 bench players, or whatever amount of bench players. And that changes the equation for you a little bit. But I do like the fluidity in terms of, hey, we're going to go to Cat at the 5 now. Naz is at the 4. Kyle is our playmaker, lead ball handler, whatever, off the bench. You have that perimeter defender in Nikhil. I think Conley can be that for you too. By the way, just as a side, I'm a Canadian, so how's Nikhil doing? Like, I'm big on the guy. I've put a lot of stock. So
he's grown up so much, man.
Hell yeah.
He's just like, and I mean, obviously I wasn't covering him before, but the dude's just like locked in, mature, super like about his business. He that really started at the very end of last season once McDaniels broke his hand, carried over to Team Canada in the summertime. I mean, like, right? You're just watching him this summer.
He's really bought into what he is now, like as a player.
And that's so big. It's like, man, teach that to like 40 other guys in the league right now and make them millions of dollars. You know, he gets it, right? And it's been valuable, and it's been, more importantly, consistent for this team. Again, I'd said it before, but Finch would always talk about last season, like this team situationally lacks a give a shit factor. And Nikhil is like the embodiment of a give a shit factor. And I mean, the last game against New Orleans on Saturday, he just has these Nikhil spurts sometimes where
at
it's
that big
a couple,
3. Yeah.
The big 3 in the possession before that, he picked off a pass and went down and had a dunk. Like,
he almost missed that dunk too, which was fun.
Did. I know. He almost got hugged there. I'm interested in what he can unlock for Jaden McDaniels. Can he allow Jaden to play off ball more? Jaden gets for like 3 years now, has gotten whoever's the best perimeter scorer on the team, I'm guarding him.
Yeah, go after. Yeah.
And along the line, like connected to that, is Jaden's had serious foul trouble issues throughout his entire career. And I wonder if you can situationally give Nikhil that Steph Curry job, and then Jaden can play off ball a little bit more and be,
weak side help, rim protector type. Yeah, I mean, we've seen it in spurts. Like and like the weak side. I don't know if there's numbers to back this up. I haven't checked it out, but like there are some legit film that can pop in terms of him being a weak side.
He's just barely there. It's like it's like a switch. Ball goes to the second side. He happens to be on the guy in the corner. He's a rim side, but they don't position him there. He starts at the point of attack, like every possession. And I think Nickeil and Mike Conley, like you said, has a little bit of this too. When Jaden's in foul trouble, can you just be like, all right, we need a little bit more Nickeil for point of attack defense? Like, I think that would do a world of difference for Jaden in being able to play more minutes throughout the game. But also, I mean, it just disrupts the rotations all the time with how often Jaden is getting in foul trouble, and Cat's going to get in foul trouble some too. I think that's like a low key, really valuable thing that Nickeil provides for this team is point of attack defense. Like maybe not all the way up to guarding like a Jason Tatum,
but
or
like
a
an
Zion
innings eater in terms of point of attack defense, right?
Eat those innings, save the fouls for Jaden McDaniels.
Yeah.
Get Jaden a defensive or all defensive team. Like I think that's how it goes.
I mean, that's crazy that he hasn't been. Anyways, that's also.
I mean, it's been because of the foul stuff. I don't think Jaden should have made all defensive team last year. I know. Right. Like, I mean, he's maybe like the 12th best defender or something, and I knock him for the deep. He was second in the league in fouls last season. And he played like 70 games. That's the one knock on Jaden right now. Technically, he's elite. The length, the shot contest, it looks like a nightmare. Right. To be guarded by Jaden McDaniels, but that nightmare comes with some baggage of foul trouble. And I just think Nickeil could help that a lot.
Okay, so I'll ask you this because I'm kind of curious where you're at with it. The J-Mac, anytime there's like a 3-and-D guy like that, right? It's like, oh man, what if he's that next guy? What if he pops up? And like, by the way, some of these future implication concerns, he just signed his extension as well. Like he's part of this. It could be alleviated from him becoming whatever people expect him to be, maybe as a scorer, maybe as a secondary or tertiary guy for them. Yeah. Where do you sit on that and his development maybe offensively? Because we know what he can be defensively, and like there can be cleanups there, but offensively, I think what is where you're like, maybe potentially is he going to pop away from being a 3-and-D guy?
Well, it's actually his contract extension he signed last month. I think is such an interesting barometer of answering this exact question is I always went off of the Mikal Bridges number for Jaden in terms of the extension, which is like 16-17% of the cap. Obviously Bridges signed it a couple years ago, so it's a lesser number, but like I was like, okay, well, I think he's going to at least get the Bridges number. Because Bridges signed that, showed I feel like Bridges was signed at that rate to be what he was coming out of the finals. And then he comes and he expands his game a little bit in Phoenix and then expands it even more in Brooklyn. And you go, what, 20 million a year for Mikal Bridges? Like that's something, if you put him on the market, people are going to trade multiple first round picks for.
Absolutely.
So I'm going off of that in my head as Bridges being like, the
blueprint,
Charmander to Charmeleon of Jaden McDaniels. And I think I'm not saying he gets all the way to Bridges for sure, but I think it seems like a reasonable expectation that it will progress in that direction and probably be in large part due to what opportunities become made available for him. Tons of opportunity became made available for Mikal Bridges when he changed teams. What does that look like in the next 3 years for the Wolves? Are Cat, Rudy, and Nas all on the team at that point? I doubt it. That ups maybe. Jaden gets this little piece of the pie. That's all that's available right now.
Oh man, if you watch games, he's last in the pecking order when it comes to the offensive usage. Like it's not even close. Yeah.
I thought it was encouraging. Ant and Cat were both in foul trouble throughout the night against New Orleans on Saturday. And Jaden just like intuitively kind of picked that up, was like, all right, like this means more of me. And he did it. So I think that's encouraging. Like I think he'll jump on the opportunity, knock on wood, Cat gets hurt, Ant gets hurt, something like that. I think he can step into more. We just like, I can't show you much film or anything of what it looks like when Jaden is like
to
the
be
number one and number
tangibly
two.
Hey, this is yeah. I get what you're saying.
We're just kind of like betting that he does the Bridges thing. I don't know. I mean, but the thing is the rate that he's signed at right now is a bargain because he has some of that upside. I think he's signed at a rate that is what he already is.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so for them to lock him in at that number, actually at a percentage of the cap slightly less than Bridges' number, like that's good. You know, that's good. Like let's see where this can go. Can he develop a little bit more Devin Vassell to his game or Bridges to his game? To be determined once the opportunity comes. But I don't know if anybody's looking at that contract and rolling their eyes at 5 years, 131 million. I'm like, I don't know. Just wait. Like,
no. I mean, with the cap going up, it's not even a conversation. I think
they were pumped about that number internally,
as they should be.
And I think the Vassell number actually kind of screwed them a little bit. Like,
oh yeah, because
they would have got. They would
probably walked in with that number. He was.
I
like,
mean, well, what was the final guaranteed number on Vassell? 5,130. What did Jaden get? 5,131. That's no coincidence, right there.
Yeah.
So it might have been even less than that had the Vassell thing not happened. But still, whatever. I think that number's gonna be just fine, and it's just normal progression of once there's more usage available, can you take it and do something with it, Jaden? And can you foul a little bit less?
Yeah.
Then he's going to be a $30 million player making in the low to mid 20s.
It's funny. So I cover the Raptors, and like one of those guys that always gets discussed is like, hey, 3-and-D guy, maybe potentially OG Anunoby, right? Yeah. And like, I don't think he has gotten to Bridges level. I don't think he will, to be honest with you, but he sort of landed somewhere in between, and maybe that's what the J-Mac thing ends up happening. It's like he doesn't have to get to Bridges level, but there's a way with, kind of like a conservative amount of usage and dribbles. Like OG can get to 20 a night on any given night just because he's become an elite shooter and like can be a nice dump off guy, whatever, right? Like there's a way for guys who don't necessarily get the usage to still be really effective offensive players. And there's a world where that happens for J-Mac eventually.
Can I ask you a question? Yeah. What do you think OG's free agent this summer, right?
Yeah.
What do you think he'll get?
Whatever his max is, I think it'd be like 44, something like that. So I think that if that's the number I'm thinking. Yeah.
So, okay. Then if OG Anunoby is an A, what is Jaden McDaniels? Like right
in terms of like the 3-and-D archetype.
Just like, okay, or what percentage of OG Anunoby is Jaden McDaniels right now? 80?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, defensively, I don't think either of them are that far away from each other. It's the offense where you're like, okay, I would probably have OG over J-Mac.
I don't totally believe in Jaden's 3-point shot.
Okay.
So I think that, and like OG, you feel pretty good about
40%. Yeah.
And to be fair, Jaden shot 39.3% or something last year. So that might be just me looking at big gangly mechanics that aren't always consistent.
Fair.
But I don't know, like, I guess that's my way of saying, like, I don't think Jaden's next step looks like, even if he plays like OG Anunoby right now,
I think
I don't think his next step is that. I think it's more of the Bridges mold, the cell mode of 3-and-D guy, but that the D part from Jaden, I mean, I think
it'll be
Jaden might be better than Bridges here pretty soon defensively.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Bridges' best season defensively was that bubble year. I think like you're comparing, it's close regardless. And like the money, it's not even going to be a problem. Okay.
Yeah.
Before you head out, wanted to ask you this: in-season tournament, the Timberwolves may be on track to potentially win it. What would that mean for a Timberwolves fan to win the in-season tournament? I had a debate with someone the other day who was like, this tournament is stupid, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, tell that to a potential Minnesota Timberwolves fan who could potentially win something, an in-season tournament, even if it is just an in-season tournament. What would that mean? Because that was my debate point, really, with someone that I was arguing with.
I don't think you're going to love my answer.
Damn it. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like,
all right.
They got clowned so much for when Ant and Pat Bev got up on the table after the play it, which was awesome. Minnesota fans love that. And so like, and they would, I think they would love some of that again, but I really do, honestly, man, I think this group of players like has their eyes set on like a pretty high goal this season.
Yeah.
And all right, cool. Like you win, like I'm going to talk to some of them about it. Like, they're taking every game seriously. I think they're like treating themselves like a team that's trying to win 50, 55 games or whatever.
Yeah.
And to that end, like you got to take all the in-season tournament games, you know, really treat them as very valuable. And I think what it could be is like something that makes this fan base start to really believe that this team could go somewhere when it actually matters.
Right.
This offseason, I think it could be a momentum builder. But Wolves fans they just want to be in the playoffs. They want to win a playoff series. I mean, it's been since 2000. It's been 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that's the next step. That's the stated goal by Tim Conley entering the season. And now maybe you win the in-season tournament. You just start the first month and a half of the season as having one of, if not the best record in the NBA. Like, okay, let's go from there. My only real insight thought on the in-season tournament is, if I'm being totally honest, I didn't put a whole ton of thought or care into it before it began. But I was in the locker room after the Golden State game, which was the Wolves' second in-season tournament game. They were 2-0.
Yep.
And it looked like, you know, like we're going to be in this thing.
Was that the game? Was that the chokehold game? Yeah.
It's the chokehold game. So it's afterwards, we're in there. It's kind of like chaos in the locker room.
We didn't even talk about that. I just realized. Sorry.
I've talked about it a lot.
Yeah,
I listen to my podcast. But I thought this was cool. I like walk in there and everyone's trying to like lurk around Rudy and Jaden to talk to them afterwards. And I was just standing over by Shake Milton and Troy Brown, and Shake had the standings and the point differentials and stuff pulled up on his phone, and they were going through it and looking at like, you know, if we play Sacramento in a week, if we beat them, like we're in. Right. And that's the first thing that really stood out to me, that I was like, oh, like players are somewhat invested in this. And it makes sense too. If you think, and I remember I left the media room, or I left the locker room, went to the media room, and I'm like, how much money has Shake Milton made in his career? and he's been in the league for 5 years. So 6 years, made $7 million total.
Right.
$500K.
That's a lot for Shake. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and so I underestimated the value of the cash reward, I think. Mm-hmm. I think that's my biggest, I was wrong about the in-season tournament. Yeah, you know, Carl or Ant, who are going to have signed hundreds of millions of dollars worth of contracts, or Rudy, you know, $500K, whatever. That's like what Draymond got suspended. That's like the hit he took for getting suspended. For those guys, not that big of a deal. But you got, in just the Wolves rotation, you got Shake Milton, who's made $7 million in his career in 5 years. Naz Reid's made $6 million in 4 years. I think Nikhil's made like 12.
Yeah.
You know, like that matters from that standpoint. And even if you are like Dame Lillard, I saw had a cool kind of clip on this that came out of the Bucks locker room last week or something, where he was like, yeah, I'm kind of invested in this for the end of the bench. I mean, the two-way guys get $500K, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that's no joke. And if you're in a locker room where you care about the young guys on the team, you care about the group up and down, like, yeah, maybe you go win that to get your guy $500K, right?
And I think Miller that $500K is the
sure.
Yeah, hell yeah,
exactly,
absolutely.
Luka Garza, like, he needs, you know, he could get 500. He missed out on NILs at Iowa, like
exactly. He could use the extra 500.
Exactly. So I thought it was cool.
Dane,
yeah,
plug away whatever you got going on, whatever you want to kind of mention before we head out of here.
Yeah, no. So I guess people don't know me. Like my background is I used to cover the team as a writer. Got laid off during COVID, started my own thing. And yeah, I'm completely independent and I don't write anymore. I just do, I do podcasts pretty much every day. And yeah, if you're looking for Wolves content this season, I have the beat writers and the columnists in the area. And one of my co-hosts come on with me throughout the week. So you got 4 or 5 episodes a week of Wolves specific content. If you want to check that out, obviously wherever you get podcasts, or we have a YouTube channel as well there to just kind of check out how we do it in Minnesota. It's not just me. It's kind of like the idea is bringing in all the other reporters who maybe don't ever talk on podcasts out of a radio hit here and there to get to know the people who are myself included, who are in the locker room around this team talking to the executives. So we have an awesome Wolves beat in terms of the reporters we have. And one of my favorite things about the show is giving a voice, like a literal voice to those people to talk to. I think we do pretty good stuff. So yeah, check that out. Dane Moore NBA podcast.
Hell yeah. Love it. And yes, I can vouch 110 times about it. Keep me informed on Timberwolves stuff all day, every day. And I'm excited. I'm really excited to see what happens with the rest of the season for this team.
It's going to be a journey.
It's going to be a journey.
It's early, dude.
By the way, it is early. It is very early. I know we're talking about, contending and who they should trade and what might happen, but
I got like a deep anxiety that I've been like way over pumping this.
Hey,
and
you never know.
But
you never know. Look, the Pelicans.
You read what's in front of you, right? Like this is what's in front of us right now. We know what happened last season. I'm just telling you, like, legitimately, this from being around team. Like you can tell when a vibe shifts within a group, and I feel that in this team. This is my 7th season or whatever, covering them. It's different. It's different. I don't know. Can they sustain it? To be determined. But I don't know how you can't believe in it as much now as you did any other time in Wolves history. It's pretty bleak out there.
Hey, listen. Hey, that's why in-season tournament champions and then a playoff win. Let's do it. I'm ready. A playoff first round win. Home court advantage too, because Minnesota has great crowds. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for listening to the Objective Basketball Podcast. Go out and check out the Dane Moore NBA Podcast as well for all things Timberwolves related. And we will see you guys for the next episode. Take care.
Follow hosts at Just S. Barahini on all socials and at The Lauren Gunn on Twitter. The Objective Basketball Podcast, delivering the NBA to you like no other.